All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Powder P. You guys know me from all the CHL media activities we've had going on this season. Tonight, we bring you, first time ever, a special event. It's the LGCHLPA Town Hall Meeting. This is where we're going to discuss training camp games and ways to improve the training camp system here in the CHL. With me, I have somebody that you may not know too much about or have heard too much from in the forums, but he has been very active in the league, making sure that you guys are taken care of as players and all your rights are abided by. And that's the LGHLPA VP, Bottomless Pit. Welcome, Bottomless Pit. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the millions and millions of listeners.
All right, Parda, thanks for that. So I don't know how many of you guys really know too much about me. I've been a fairly quiet guy most of the time, but I've always taken an interest with League Gaming. I've been in your guys' position in the training camps at some point, and changing positions, sometimes been sent back down there too. So I know the stuff that you guys are going through, and I've seen some of the struggles managers go through as well. And the whole point about this town hall is basically we want to improve things on a really big scale. There's a lot of complaints from the training camp and the CHL in different angles, but I think if we work on things, we get your voices heard, get some focus put on this, then we can make those changes that are needed to make this what we really want it to be. So with that being said, sorry, I just pulled my mic out here. All right, sorry about that. I just pulled my mic out for a second by accident. So with that being said, just going to give a quick format as to how we're doing this here. I'm going to try and give basically a quick summary of everything that we're going to cover. Then I want to basically touch on a couple of different subjects, about one at a time. Give you my viewpoints and experience this season, and where right now where things are going or not going. But then we got Nicky W here as well. He's been one of the guys who has had some objections about how it's been done. So I've asked him to join us here to give a side from a different angle about the training camps. And then we also want to open it up to you guys to hear what you guys have to say and hear your questions. And so that way we can take it all in and have something to work with. So with that being said, basically the way that we're going to do this is the topics. We're going to go different topics that are on the survey that I put out for the CHL regarding the training camps. There's topics basically going from first of all, general concept about the training camps, awareness about the training camps, the scheduling, and the game formats. And then there's also stats and video footage. And finally, and but not least, rules and violations. And of course, so hopefully some time for you guys to give your input as well about anything that we haven't talked about. Before I do that, though, I want to give Nicky a chance just to say something, and just so that he can introduce himself as well. Nicky, if you can go right ahead and introduce yourself there.
What's going on, guys? It's Nicky W. I'm the GM of the Medicine Hat Tigers. I know most of you guys, at least in the room anyway. I don't know why I got picked, honestly, to be like the counter argument. My only concern regarding this specific topic was the timing, but I guess we'll get deeper into that as we discuss it.
All right. So first thing that I just want to talk about in general is the scouting game concept. Again, basically the idea of the training camps, everybody knows in general that it's CHL is deemed as the league where things are developed, where things get picked out of, and the guys are going to essentially be moving up. And so we've got about right now 40 teams in there, and then we've got also a list of training camp players who basically didn't make it onto a team for one reason or another, but also largely restricted because of lack of management. So in that pool, we have about 680 players, roughly. Some which just want to play some games, some which would like to move up to AHL and NHL, some who maybe don't say much or don't show. There's both those who are positive about things and try and work their way up. There's those who basically don't like what's going on in their experience, and so they end up leaving. And then, of course, there's also the other angle from it, the GMs and whatnot, which and the AGMs, which basically have trouble filling in gaps and finding good players and keeping their teams happy and that sort of thing. So even though there is this large pool, the training camp players oftentimes don't seem to be filling the need. Anyways, the idea of the training camps is basically to give some exposure to the guys who are in the training camps. So there's been the idea or the concept that one of the reasons these guys tend to stay down there or don't get moved up or don't get looked at is because they're not seen on a proper team or they're not given a chance to play. So this is a chance to basically give them that opportunity. So that in a nutshell is what it is. In the end, long-term goal, of course, is to improve the quality of the play in the league, to get a lot of guys more active, potentially at some point maybe having a full 60 teams with good quality players. Right now, that probably seems like a bit of a fantasy. So let me start off with this, just in general, without going into too many specifics. Personally, I've always thought that training camps, in one way or another, regardless of how it's done, is going to be something that's good for the league. And that's my personal opinion. The general feedback that I've had from the guys is basically from those that are active in the training camps, though, is that yes, it's good for them and they're happy about it. But of course, I don't hear a lot from the people who don't partake. So with that, I'm gonna first give Nikki a chance to say something just in general about the training camp. See maybe if there's a different angle of things that you'd like to mention there.
Thanks, man. Yeah, again, my main gripe was the timing. We started working on this mid-season. There are a lot of clubs that had been doing their own scouting, that had kept their training camps pretty active, or as active as you can be, while at the same time telling them, hey, don't hold your breath. You got to wait for a call up. You got to, wait for a trade or something like that. So when the league started to intervene, so to speak, and I feel like it kind of messed up the chemistry that some of the teams had already created within their training camp. We had depth charts and things like that, and now we had guys that all of a sudden wanted to request trades because they felt like maybe they'd have a better opportunity on another team. And then as you go deeper into the season, you're having depth problems because half of your active players have left because the league kind of implied that maybe they just need to get noticed by another team. And I've sent some of those guys who requested trades to other teams, and they sat on their training camp, so it really didn't solve anything. Again, a time and a place for it. If you want to do it before the season, I have no problem with that. I mean, I think that if you're an active GM, you should be doing your own scouting. I don't think it's really a league issue or even a PA issue. I think this year was also an anomaly. We had so many training camp players and just not enough management to put them anywhere. So, I mean, it's hard to judge it just based on this one season. But, again, that was my main gripe, was I had players that were on my team that were being kind of paraded around other GMs, and I felt like, if they're under contracts with our club, then we should be the only team scouting our players, so to speak. I mean, if another active GM wanted to get together and maybe have a training camp game, I definitely would have been up for that. I just thought the league was kind of overstepping their bounds in that situation, making it a league issue instead of a team-by-team issue.
All right, so there you hear about two different perspectives about it. I want to go ahead and give the guys in the lobby a chance to perhaps give their opinions or questions if you have any. Basically, if you have a question or something and somebody else is talking, please just in the lobby go ahead and post like a question mark or something, and then that way we know that that you have something to say. And so I think Brando Vito is in here, so I'm gonna pick on him for a little bit. Is there something you want to add to this conversation so far, just again in general about the training camps, and then let's try and keep it somewhat short, and then that way we can jump into the nitty gritty about the training camps.
For everybody that's not in the lobby and just listening, just we do have a lobby up. It's called the LGHLPA Town Hall. It's a free lobby. You can join in, participate. We also have the Twitter feed open. It is CHL Town Hall. Hashtag that. We'll get those questions read off as well. And keep in mind, this is for you guys. This is to make the league better as a whole. It's not picking on just TCs, but this is a way to strengthen the entire CHL as a whole. Keep that in mind. Does he got a question? All right, yeah, bear with us while we relay the question to you guys.
If I can make a rebuttal.
Go ahead. What was the question, though? The question is for everybody else.
Again, strictly a timing situation. I felt like we did a lot of work in Medicine Hat to try to scout everybody. We had scouting games every day, 3 or 4 of them. I know there's a lot. I would say a majority of the teams, maybe you disagree, did their own scouting and worked with their own training camp and kept their training camp active. I would like to hope anyway that a majority of the GMs, dealt with that responsibility of running a team. If they didn't, then I feel like giving them the same competitive advantage that the people who put the work in, that part just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Along with just too many chances for tampering. I talked to Bottomless beforehand, and he said something like, we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Well, it happens. I've had multiple tampering situations this year with players, and other GMs contacting them and saying, oh, you'd be a starter on my team. So now you're giving them like a league-sponsored forum to do it. I just feel like just the wrong time. Again, if you wanted to do it at the beginning of the season, that's great, but we were trying to make up for lost time, and it was just too late. At that time, with guys already under contract, it just didn't make sense to me.
Real quick, Nikki or Bottomless Pit, can you guys go ahead and just repeat that for those listening on YouTube, because the question isn't heard on the Hangout session.
All right. So there's a couple of things I want to add in there. One of the things I remembered that when I first was pitching this idea to B. McDonald and Sean early on in the season was the whole problem about forfeits at the end of the year or the end of the season. Well, there's a lot of forfeits that happen, and there's a lot of people that essentially don't play, and they have the opportunity to. In the meantime, you've got 680 guys here who, the majority of them, would love to take their spot. Right? A lot of them, they don't even get looked at, again, because management doesn't want to take the risk about the fact that we don't know if that person's active or not. Right? So again, one of the things that goes hand in hand with this, which we'll get into a little bit more later, is the stats. Sorry about the background noise here, guys. Anyways, the stats is one of the things that, of course, is a work in progress, but the idea is to also build some stats for these guys, tied together with some footage, which gives management and other teams a chance to be able to see all this stuff. Now, I lost my train of thought there about one of the things that Nikki had said, but in regards to the league giving an opportunity for player tampering and whatnot. The only rebuttal that I really have about that is that whether the league puts up together a scouting lobby or whatnot or not, chances are that if people are going to, whether it's management or players, are going to go about player tampering, they're going to find a way to do it. Now, I can't guarantee in any way, shape, or form that player tampering won't happen, but what I can do to my best abilities is make sure that they don't happen during the events that we hold. So players are aware of the rules, or we try and make them aware of it if they don't. We hear anything about trade talk whatsoever, and we mention to it that can't happen here, and that those are grounds for different types of punishments and whatnot. So we do what we can, same just like we would if we were in any other LG game, and the same kind of conversation happened. So I mean, the fact that it can happen elsewhere isn't much of an argument, but again, going back to my personal opinion, my feeling is just that the benefits outweigh the possibility of something like that happen, which I don't really think is as great as what maybe we're giving the attention to be, and at least not any greater than it previously existed. Now, again, moving along with the topic here about the concept. No, sorry, were there any players or anybody that wanted to say anything else here? I think that's from that he posted that he wanted to make a comment there.
We have Prince 10 and Dirkma. Detrova, I don't know.
And don't forget, guys, anything said in that lobby needs to be repeated on air so everybody on the YouTube can listen to it later and understand what's going on. Don't forget that.
Okay, your ears on, buddy? Is he gone? He's gone. He left the lobby.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, hopefully we'll get some input from him in another way. So I guess we'll keep moving right along here. So again, those are some of the perspectives that are there. One of the next things about the concepts is basically a question to you guys. Basically, is how involved, if we're going to continue doing this, should the PA be, right? How many games should we hold, or what periods during the season or off season should we hold the games? And that's something that's a big question mark right now. I don't really have an answer, but again, in line with that, the training camps in general are a good thing for the league. The only thing that I can really think of is the more that we hold, the better it is. But we've got to do it properly, otherwise it's just going to lose interest and it's not going to do anything for anybody.
Oh, if I can interject, wouldn't the focus be better off served on finding new management if we have this many training camp players, as opposed to focusing on the overwhelming amount of training camp players we have? Shouldn't we be looking for permanent homes for them, for real teams? Like, instead of just trying to work out trades for bumping somebody else off an active roster, shouldn't we be trying to find more teams? I guess that would be a better solution, at least on my end.
If I could throw in my 2 cents here real quick. Yeah, I've been approached by B. McDonald. As you guys know, he is the league commissioner all around. He that's his goal, is to be able to field 60 full teams. And if these scouting lobbies are to continue, I feel like, if anything, you guys should be pushing on these active TC, want to be rostered players into we want to get them training as to an explanation as to what it is to be a GM. I did it last season. Nicky does it now.
I don't know if his headset came undone or not. I mean, it's a rhetorical question, I guess. I mean, we haven't, as we've agreed on, it's there is an overwhelming amount of training camp players, and there's just no place to put them. Even if we get exposure for a select few training camp players, they're going to take the spot of an active roster player, right? I mean, that's the end game. Go ahead. No, that's fine. Right.
For those of you listening at home and thinking that it's just a quiet time here, we actually have comments going on into the lobby. It is titled LGPA Town Hall. Feel free to join. Come in, comment, be a part of the conversation. Don't just be another guy in the crowd. Join us, join the conversation, and really get involved and help shape the future of this league. So, what was that last comment there? And who was it from?
Don't eat kitty food. Give me your food. Did the girls get to watch America's Got Talent?
Yes.
Well, I understand that part. I guess I just figured if you're in a perfect world, you're gonna have an AHL player getting called up to the NHL and a CHL player taking that player's spot, and then a training camp player would move up to the CHL team. But I mean, most of the time like I said, at least in my case, you're taking a spot away from an active player that might not be performing well or something like that, and then they're back in that same boat as the other player. I don't know if that's what we're focusing on, but at least in my experience, if I could identify an active player that could outplay someone on my roster, they're taking the spot because that's fair. I don't show favoritism to players that have been here longer. I show it to players who perform well. So I always tell my training camp personally, if you want to make the team, play well. That's it. Put up the numbers, and you can take anybody's spot. You can have my spot. I don't care.
All right, so I want to add in there basically. Sorry, guys, we got a new puppy here. All right, so I want to add in there basically. Perhaps part of the training camps is to take somebody's spot, if the person is better. But I think it's more the more greater focus is that we want in a situation where somebody bails or somebody has to be banned or ECU times and whatever, that the GMs basically know who they can identify who are the active players that they can use. And I mean, if in a perfect world, everybody would be active, everybody would be communicating with each other, and really there would be very little that the PA would need to be done doing in regard. But the fact of the matter, like we've all, there is a shortage of managers, and then there's a question about even the managers that are there, about the quality of the managers. So right now, in my opinion, the PA has a responsibility to play a little bit of a role of getting these guys some exposure, and perhaps indirectly or unintentionally, I hadn't even thought about it in this way, but perhaps also even give an example to some of those GMs and AGMs about some of the work that they should be doing as well, because it is even in the Constitution that one of their responsibilities is, for example, practices. Right. Another responsibility, of course, is to when there's a need for an ECU, that they're the ones who are making the calls to the guys who they know can fill that void, so that we don't have these situations where there's forfeits and whatnot. Or maybe in a situation like I don't really know all of the things that happen in terms of who got banned and whatnot, but regarding second tags or regarding Texas incident, Checkers incident, but obviously there are voids to fill, right? So I think the question is, who do you fill them with? In some cases, a lot of people are essentially saying that they don't have options, right? The guys who they have on the TC roster aren't there. So part of the responsibility as well here is, again, that in a perfect world would be that you go to scout these guys, and they're not showing up, they're not showing an interest or whatever. They got basically a 3-strike rule when it comes to the regular games. Is there a need for, with training camps in whichever form it's held, to be able to identify who are these inactive players, so that way they're easily spotted and we basically know who they are come next season. We don't, maybe there's some kind of domino effect that should happen there, so that way we're not left with this sort of question mark, and that way we actually know what we can work with to make a good league or a better league.
But don't you feel like that's treating the symptom instead of the cause? I mean,
I'm going to answer that by saying this. The extent of my responsibilities here are not in regards to fixing the problem about the GMs and AGMs, although it is something, again, that the league is aware of and that we're trying to do things about. But what I want to mention, the reason why I bring it up is because here I want to stay focused with working with what we're doing right now. And by all means, if the players turn around and say this is something we shouldn't be doing, then we have to know so that we can put an end to it, right? But again, the reason for this town hall again is not so much to let's look at the real problems in terms of that's concerned, but let's see what we can do to improve things with the system that we're working with or with what we're trying to develop, perhaps simultaneously. I think even if we have the 60 teams, hopefully that would mean that we would have more players. I think with 60 teams, if we had them right now, we'd have a full 17-man roster still, with considerably less people in the training camps. But with that kind of growth, one of the things that I think that we're not factoring in here is that chances are we're going to have more signups than what we have, and we're still going to have this lingering problem about the training camps regardless. And the idea is, in the end, regardless of how many leagues we have, that the best players play. That's the way that the sports world works, is, or at least you try to make it that way so that it's most entertaining and the best skill level is out there. So let's try and move this along a little bit, because I think we're already at 46 minutes here, and there's a lot still to cover. So I'm going to try and keep responses a little bit more shorter, but the idea here again is to trigger your thoughts and remind you to go and put in your answers, your comments and whatnot in the scouting games, put stuff up in the forums to get conversation going and give us a clear direction. So anyways, the next thing here is also about should the PA be holding scouting games during the off season, or even past the trade deadline for that matter. And again, I don't have a clear answer about that. The only thing that I have to go on at this point is the more we hold, the better. But again, I don't know if anybody wants to say anything about that.
You obviously tried to have a change channel.
No, I didn't. I went to the TV, and it's right there by the TV.
While this next comment being out there, you're watching the LGHLPA Town Hall meeting discussing CHL TC scouting games. We have a lobby up, LGPA Town Hall. You can join us, chime in, hit us up on Twitter, the hashtag CHL Town Hall, and we'll get
That's a fair point. I think we should focus mostly on the preseason scouting, and I believe a lot of teams do their own preseason scouting. I guess that's the difference between my stance and others, is that I think the team should be responsible for it.
Well, I think let me elaborate the question a little bit more as well. The reason why the question comes up is because a lot of times you mentioned the scouting games that happen preseason, Usually those don't tend to happen until owners are selected, management is selected, uh, the um, the bidding has already started in one way or another, and things along those lines. And then there's a very short time period where there's this massive flood of scouting games that are thrown up by some teams. So other teams don't put any up at all. But I think it's more so a question about the gap between, again, whether it's the trade deadline or the end of the playoffs, and before those scouting games tend to happen. Should the PA be doing anything there to these guys who were in the training camps to give better name for, even if it is for the bidding or whatnot. Um, so I think that's the main reason why I put the question in there is for that reason there. And I think along with it comes up these other topics as well about mid-season, playoff time, trades and whatnot. So again, I don't know if there's much more to be said there. I don't know if there's any. I just want to let you guys know I don't really have a view of the lobby here right now. So if you guys can let me know if there's any other players that want to say something, or they can just jump in and just ask for a turn here.
There are a couple. I'd be totally on board with that. No question.
On what? So broadcast, what's going on?
Just got weird. Dead air. What are we gonna do, Powder? Can't have this.
Yeah, I've been trying to get you guys to relay more of what's going on in there. I have my headset on, but I am trying to keep.
All right, sorry about that. My mic got pulled out again. So basically, again, it was open to just about anybody. Then we tried a couple other formats, like basically getting the GMs more involved as well to see what kind of response we'd get there as well. So we did some games where it was completely GMs on one team and training camps on the other. We've done some mixed format where it was mixed GMs and training camps on the same team. Only today did I get around to actually taking those random players from training camps and setting up a line or a couple of lines together with them. But I think it was very short notice, just like the town hall, and so I didn't actually get a team or players from one team versus another team. So these are some of the things that have happened. I did also post out there to try and get these team versus team type training camp games going. But I also did leave it in the hands of the training camp players to sort of organize themselves in that regard as well. So that may have been the downfall there, but as you can imagine, basically that didn't happen. So these are some of the formats. I've also thought about doing like a tournament type style, where basically we can do different type of formats for tournaments, but as long as people are showing up, which is the key, then we can work with different types of formats and restricting it to certain certain types of formats. But again, we need your feedback here. So again, I'll leave that open to you guys to answer here right now as well. If you have any preferences, I think there's a few guys here who have been in the training camps. They can also maybe give a little bit of input if they could step up and maybe say something about what their experience has been.
Time to try to work my way up there. Actually, I was with several different teams, kind of switching around. I got placed on waivers a couple of times. I've been involved in a trade and I was really kind of struggling down in the TC roster. There's kind of a lot of players down there until I kind of started to just show up for games, show up whenever my team needed me, to try to be as available as possible, and I ended up being able to finally get a spot on that main roster. But it kind of took me a while before then.
Who's talking right now?
BB Trunks.
Say Lazy Kids in the same boat as you. He bounced around from team to team, got his way up to the main roster, and it's all about showing up. I mean, again, I know we're talking about the specific topic, but it's a league-wide issue. There's so many other little branches and things like that. So it's hard for me to focus on this one thing when there's this all-encompassing problem.
Oh, I agree, Nikki. I agree with you. We definitely have an issue. We have too many players, not enough management. We could fill these teams up if we had the management. The key here is to find solid management, guys like yourself, Bocasmo, Nutty Grandpa, Hamilton, all those guys, Detrima, Archie. These guys are solid GMs that need to honestly get other guys involved in the management process.
Yep, I totally agree with that. And again, I think that's an organization issue. I think iCheap said it. He works his guys. He's working with other teams to get training camp games going. I mean, that's a good GM. That's good management. Unfortunately, training camp players are suffering because we have some shoddy management issues, and now we're talking about adding even more managers. So, again, I keep circling back to maybe we need to educate our managers better. We need to screen them better. We need to, provide some sort of incentive. It's a thankless job most of the time, right? I mean, anyone who's done it knows. Especially if your team's not doing well, forget it. You have to show up every day and keep guys motivated. And I just think, again, we're focusing on this small issue when there's a much bigger issue at hand.
Nikki, were you a GM last season?
Sorry about that here. Sorry, I just want to throw in there something else that I wanted to put out there to the community, and that's something that's, in my opinion, that really hasn't been, I haven't been doing at this point, again, because we're trying to work within our limitations and see where things go as well, and again, get feedback from you guys. So one of my thoughts essentially about the situation is that yes, we should be, maybe the PA should be focusing more on working with management to work on their scouting games. Perhaps we do need to maybe, I don't know if there's a need for, again, constitutional change to put a requirement regarding their training camp players and how involved they are, or how we check things to see if if they're doing their job with the training camps, or whether the training camp players aren't doing their part in making themselves available and doing what they need to do for their management and for their team. But again, my vision, if it were to happen however I designed it, would be to focus on the team training camp scouting within their own organization, and the PA would play a role, if any, would be sort of a catch-all for. It would probably be mostly the newer players who don't know how to get around and that sort of thing, but we'd still be assisting them to focus on the team. But it would be basically, because if we're looking at, I think the CHL, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw some teams that have a training camp roster of 30 players, right? There's 9 weeks in the season, 30-some players. You're largely focused on your main roster and getting the quality of the play where you want it so you can make the playoffs. One of the main complaints that I've heard a lot of, even before all of this started from management, was that we just don't have the time to put into these other guys who, we have a tough time getting any communication with, let alone putting any time to seeing if they're good or developing them and that sort of thing. But
I mean, you just have to make time. I mean, when you take on their club, you have to be able to put in the time.
Yeah, so there's also the lingering thought of possibly whether we need, whether it's an existing player on the 17-man roster given an additional responsibility, whether that person's responsibility, aside from their games, is also to work with the training camp players. Again, these are just thoughts that I'm now throwing out there, but it's a different direction that the training camps can go, right? So whether that's, then you get into topics about having to, whether you should consider cap space on top of what's already there, or how do salaries play into effect, and all of these sorts of things. But all of this, regardless of which direction we go, is basically we need to know from the community, which direction do you want us to go? Do you want us to focus with the teams? Do you want us to continue with the PA running the majority of the situation, or what's the case? So I'm going to move along here again because the clock's ticking here. So because and again, there may not have been a lot here who have been in the training camps, but about the question of basically how well heard of were the training camps this season? How was advertising for it? How was the accessibility and making the flow of just getting the guys together or the management together? And even once they're in the lobby, how did that go?
I mean, to me, that's like saying, how stylish is this Band-Aid that we threw over this issue? Like, it still doesn't matter. I mean, it really doesn't. It doesn't matter. It's not going to solve the problem regardless. I mean, it's a good idea, and everyone should appreciate it, and anyone who's going to put in some time to try to help the cause, that's great. But at the end of the day, we're still going to have that exact same problem. I mean, as a team that had a very active training camp, what happens is they feel like they played their way onto the roster. Now you have angry, disgruntled players that think they could go to another team and play there or whatever, and it just doesn't work out like that when you have 45 players on your training camp roster. And another thing that you mentioned that I wanted to jump on was you were talking about the amount of players that were on some people's training camps. I mean, that's another management issue. We have guys pulling guys off of waivers, and they have no intention of actually using them. And we're basically self-policing as GMs. We have to, follow our own players through waivers and make sure that people aren't claiming them for no reason. I mean, and you guys must have seen this. I mean, there are teams that had 90 players on their team. They're hurting that whole training camp by doing stuff like that. Meanwhile, some of the better GMs are weeding out their inactives essentially to help their team, but in the process it's helping other teams by identifying active players when they couldn't do it themselves. I don't know. It's just such a big problem.
Well, I almost hesitate to ask you this question here, but and that's basically the question of just in regards to training camps and scheduling, scouting games and whatever, even within your own team. I almost don't want to ask you just because I don't want to give away your secret, right? But
I mean, there's no secret to it. If you're go ahead, finish your question.
no,
I mean, are you saying like how do you do it? How do you keep them active? I mean, you give them the opportunity. You explain that there's no politics involved. Lazy Kid who's in the lobby right now, he came from another team. I didn't care, where he's from, how old he was. I want to see what he can do on the ice, and if he's better than the other guy, he plays. And you tell your entire training camp that if you're better than the other guy, you're gonna play. I mean, I had a friend, like a good friend that I played with for a couple years now, and I replaced him with someone I didn't even know, and he was pissed. But that's the way the game goes. That's the only way for it to be fair. So you have, we have a club, an ESHL club. Everybody's invited. Everybody on the team, training camp, doesn't matter. They're all invited. They can all play anytime they want. They can, build up chemistry with the starters. Then the starters come to me and they say, hey, I played a club game with this dude last night and he played out of his mind. Maybe we should give him a chance. And then I call him up to the main roster and I give them the chance, and they can stick as long as they play well. I mean, and everyone should be doing that, I think, anyway.
Yeah, I know my team, the Spokane Chiefs, Nutty Grandpa, and Tigers, they do the same thing with the EASHL clubs, as well as they, after league games every night, they're either playing drop-ins or club or something, and they're always constantly messaging TC guys to come and play. And we're in week 8, week 6, week 7, I don't even know what week it is anymore. And it's constant involvement with our team, which is why this whole system surprised me as well. But once again, it's addressing a problem, but not necessarily the best possible solution. But it's definitely a starting point,
Yeah, and I mean, from a PA standpoint specifically, I don't see how it's really a PA issue. I think the PA should be focusing on, I guess, more like moral support and keeping the morale high. But it should be a BOG issue, trying to find us some more managers that can give these kids a place to play. And weeding out the herd is on the GMs. I mean, I started the season with, 30 kids on my TC roster, and half of them were inactive. And you have to identify them and get rid of them and push the other guys up and hope that you get some good random assignments that are actually here to play. But again, that's an organizational issue. It's not a league issue. It's not a PA issue. It's picking the right management and hoping that they're gonna spend the extra couple hours every night. And it really is a couple hours, 3-4 hours a night working, overtime on top of all the other stuff you have to do. And that's what separates the good teams from the bad teams. And I think the standings speak for themselves. You can see who's putting in the work and who's not.
True that.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because the question about if the league should be focusing more so on management and whatnot, and developing management or getting more management or more qualified management. Again, that's not really a PA issue, correct? So the question is so the question is, what can the PA do? What the PA can do is work with the players, right? And again, we go back to well, if that's the case, then is this the best way that the PA can do it?
Gotta love the dead air.
Yeah, basically what's happening is we got one of the players agreeing with Nikki here that the main focus here is the issue about management needing to get more involved, essentially. So the large question that's coming up again is basically where's the PA's role in this whole situation, because we can't really work with the GMs. Our focus is on the players.
For those of you just tuning in, you are watching the LGHLPA town hall meeting discussing TC training camps and all that good stuff.
We've actually got a lot of active talk in the chat. We just, you can't pick them up audibly. So.
So right now the idea is being brought up about basically going back to the PA reps in each team, and that basically the PA is misguided or misfocused on how we're going about the larger issues, and really that the PA shouldn't be focusing on training camps and doing our own leagues or teams. So just relating this back to the radio show, guys, and that basically we should be more addressing the issues on a team level and whatnot from the player's perspective as it's brought to us from different players. So the one thing I want to bring up there, though, is that don't forget that we came from this kind of system that you guys are suggesting about, that basically each team have their player reps. And in my experience from that, when I was not involved in whether it was management or staff or anything like that, the large problem that I saw from one season to the next was that basically there was maybe one or two good reps, or maybe a handful of good reps, and the rest of them is the same kind of issue with management, is that they really weren't there for the players. Or again, it's in the end, it's still one way or another still has to be communicated by the players to the PA. And we throw out polls, we throw out surveys, we try and talk to the players out there, we get involved in the chat box and the forums, but unless it's some major event that seems to be happening, oftentimes we don't hear about it, right? So again, I think we're kind of going on a tangent here from the conversation about the scouting games. I hear you about what you're talking about these other issues and whatnot, and I think generally these conversations probably should generate some polls about some fundamentals here that we're addressing right now. Is basically, is the PA misguided with the training camps or not, and what is the player consensus? So that's one thing that we're going to have to get an answer on pronto. But again, to try and stay on topic here about the training camps, I want to thank you first of all for all of your comments, both positive and negative. Is there anybody who has some supporting comments to make about the training camps here? Again, I don't have a view of the lobby here right now, so.
Might as well, can't hear.
Okay, I apologize about that. I do have a very cheap mic, so I'm trying to speak loudly here, but yeah, with the Xbox One coming along, I was going to opt out of having a mic, but I my team, and obviously in this kind of situation presented that I needed to have one, so I went cheapo on it. But okay, so let's move along here a little bit. So with the mention of Xbox One, there's the possibility of basically players or management basically not needing to have a scouting representative in the game itself. So there's a question again about scheduling here. Who needs to be involved, who shouldn't be involved in the games, and what kind of repercussions should there be for people who shouldn't be there and do try to participate, or that do jump into a game with the other people not knowing that they shouldn't be there. So let me give you a perfect example of one thing that happened is basically when the management was invited to partake, there was I won't mention any names or players, but there was one team that basically the player presented himself as a representative of the management for that team to partake in the scouting games, and that was something that I hadn't even thought about at that point. So the initial response was no, and for them to not jump into the game. We had a severe lack of attendance, so I didn't exactly want to throw the game out the window either. So in the end, on that day, I permitted it. Lo and behold, and I will be open to disclosure here, basically, after the game and between that one and the next one, the said player made a few statements along the lines of, I want to play with such and such player because I want to see him for my team. I want to scout, X and X player and that sort of thing. And I turn around and basically tell him, we can't have that. That's not permitted here, and I'm sorry, but you're going to have to leave. That's just strictly against the rules. And this brings up the question about player tampering. But again, it goes back to the question about scheduling as well. How do we do it? If we go about it, if we continue with it, even if it's on a much smaller scale, who should be involved, who shouldn't, and it brings up the question about some rules and whatnot that are whether they're needed or not. And this is under the assumption that the consensus from the players will be to continue with the scouting game. So I'll leave that open to you guys to rebut and to give your opinions and questions. I'm not sure if either Brando or Nikki or even Powda, if you have anything to say about that.
I'm right back to where I started, right? I mean, it's still just dealing with a situation that's so much bigger than that, and I just feel like we're wasting time on an issue that it should just be irrelevant. I guess that's it. Yeah, I don't think this is the issue we should be focusing on.
Yeah, I don't think it's the issue they should be focusing on, but I can understand their concern. They probably get...
Okay, and that's a fair opinion to make. So go right ahead.
I think they...
I'm not sure if my mic is cutting out in the lobby.
Yeah, you guys picking me up still?
I'm picking you up, but the people in the lobby can't hear you anymore, obviously.
Oh yeah, my mic was going crazy, so I'm just trying to not...
All right, so it's a valid point to make. It's a valid opinion to have. Again, the question is that the consensus of the players that are out there, and both roster players and TC players alike in the CHL. CHL roster guys have just as much of a voice as the TC guys do here on this whole subject because it affects them as well. So again, I think we'll probably try and focus on some of the more fundamental questions to give us some clear guidance on A, should we continue or not, and B, if we do, which direction, or if we don't, what should we be focusing on to try and...
That's exactly the point right there. Taking it from that and just saying, what can we do fundamentally from the ground up, and instead of just beating the dead horse, I think in this case, The PA should be looking at, the overall big picture and what they can do to improve on the things that they're already responsible for, aside from adding, new responsibilities that should be handled by management. Even though, again, we're saying maybe, not enough managers are involved, and that's a problem we're going to have forever, unfortunately. But at the same time, like I said, I think from a PA standpoint, it's really just adding stuff to your plate that just doesn't apply to you and really won't benefit the PA, in my opinion.
All right. Let me change things up a little bit here. Let's assume that the PA does change its direction a little bit and does go with the team scouting approach and trying to work with the management and the players to get that ball rolling the way that it should be. There's still the question about, again, how do we handle the scheduling, and do we need to throw out 3 strike rules for the training camp players regardless of how the training camps are done? And if, at what times should the games be held? Because again, LG has their hours and has our hours, and the question is, some players will be available before, some won't be after. So what is, how do we go about making this a mainstream approach, whether it's a team-based scouting game approach or whether it's a PA-focused approach? There's still a question about scheduling, and that's, again, something else that we need some guidance on.
I mean, if that's a question, I'll go back to it being a team issue. The PA doesn't need guidance on training camp players staying active. The management needs guidance on it, I guess. I mean, if there are things that the league can do to help us, maybe give us another lobby, structure, kind of like what we have already for regular league games. We could maybe have a lobby for training camp games, let them sign up there. I'd be down for that. I mean, if we're just throwing ideas up against the wall and seeing if they stick or whatever, that's fine. I just think that we should change the direction and start looking at the big picture and trying to solve it, from the root, as opposed to solving it this far down where they're already frustrated and already inactive, and the guys are dropping off. It's already too late at that point. If they come in right away and they get greeted, with the PA banners and balloons and, hey, thanks for coming, you're so, we want you to be a big part of this league, blah, 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 and keep that morale high right from the get-go, as opposed to, guys come in that are randomly assigned and they have no idea, what anything. It's like, oh, my friend told me to sign up and I entered my email address and that's all I know about the league. So there's some informational issues right away. Again, that management should be able to handle. But it wouldn't hurt to have the PA kind of jump in there and make sure everybody knows that they're special too, so to speak. That this isn't a league based on politics, or at least I tell myself that every day. And that if you play your ass off, you're gonna move up the chain. And just keep them motivated, make them understand that they're gonna get their opportunities. But if there are teams out there that aren't giving players opportunities, maybe, again, if we're throwing ideas out there, give these kids on the training camp more than one trade request or something like that. Because maybe someone puts in a trade request on training camp and I don't like the way they do it, so I send them to a place that's never going to use them. Now that kid's even more upset or whatever. I feel like maybe they don't have enough rights. They don't have enough flexibility to further their own careers. They have to rely on management. And again, now we're going full circle. Okay, so now is it the league's responsibility to help them get that marketing or help them get their name out there? Or is it, I mean, I saw a kid make a post on a forum to promote himself. People are finding ways to do it. I just don't know if having league organized training camp games is the solution. I think that that's just a temporary fix.
Okay, I want to try and take you. I'm sorry, go right ahead there.
Is it B Prince?
I do want to try and put a spin on it here, Nikki. I'm going to try and ask you this again to try and get the conversation out with the players here again. But how would you handle then a situation where one of the things that we hear from players is that GMs and AGMs they're not even looking in the training camps at all. So when they look to make changes or moves or whatever to do things for their team, they're looking at other teams regardless, and they don't even look downwards to see if there's options that are available as well. So how would you go to address that situation there? And I know, again, we're going on a tangent here, but...
Well, that's a pretty big question, obviously. I mean, you'd have to get to the root of the problem, which is what I've been saying from the beginning. But I guess if if I had to make a decision right now on how I would do that, I would make maybe 1 or 2 games, league mandated training camp games. Maybe get 6v6 of your own training camp. Let them play against each other. That'd be a good way to scout them. I guess I'm still focused on keeping other managers away from my players once they're under contract. If they're not under contract, then, I mean, anyone can do whatever. But when we first started debating this, it was a mid-season change where it was like, okay, these training camp guys, they're not getting looked at enough, so we're going to start doing this right now. And I felt like, and another GM that was in here earlier said the same thing, we put in all this work, we're keeping our training camp active, we're building our depth charts, and then the league's going to come in and do that for everybody else. And I just felt like that didn't fly for me. I felt like it was giving them a competitive advantage they didn't really earn. But yeah, I mean that would be the best solution if we're gonna just try to do a quick fix. Just have mandated training camp games once a week, twice a week. I'd hate to put more work on any other GMs in the league, but I think we can handle it, right? I mean, just 1 or 2 more games to schedule and make sure everybody shows up, and that way the training camp players can prove that they're active. They can play against other players that are looking to earn a spot, so they have the same kind of drive. I'd prefer, especially once the rosters are established, to keep it either in your own organization or to organize it with another team that you respect or that you know has put in the work that you've put in, as opposed to some teams who just kind of are on autopilot all season, and then the league comes out and hands them a scouting report from their training camp that they didn't even know existed until the league did it for them.
So basically, BB Prince right now is just mentioning other ways that even the AHL teams are going about doing some scouting and whatnot within their rosters. So basically what's being presented is that there are other options out there opposed to the way that the PA is handling it right now.
No, I agree with Nikki huge on this whole issue. I think that if we're going to sit here and play the PA is going to take over the scouting issue, well, then why not? Why do we have TCs? What we should do is just have one big communal training camp, and if you need an ECU, well, you get somebody random. I mean, because the way things are going right now is what Nikki's saying is some of these GMs, if you guys do this, they don't have to do a thing, and then the harder working GMs aren't going to be rewarded for their hard work. It's just one of those things that it's going to be an unfair, advantage for that guy that doesn't do his homework. A guy like Bocasmo who's got a set lineup over in Kamloops, he can just come check the scouting report, see if any of his guys played. But little do we know, he never took the time to scout any of them, and now he's hurting.
I feel bad that you use him as a reference because I know that kid puts in more work.
I know, that's why I used him as a reference, because I know he puts in more work.
He won't take offense to it because he knows he puts in the work. I see him with his lobby every single day.
I know you love him.
But yeah, on to BB Prince's point about the AHL, that's another huge issue that I've had that, I mean, again, is separate from this issue, but I feel like they're all connected. With this league, as opposed to, quote unquote, the other league, there's no affiliation between CHL and AHL. I relied on that personally coming up I went directly from the CHL to the NHL because we scrimmaged against our AHL affiliates, we scrimmaged against our NHL affiliates. There was always another group of 6 guys that wanted to play. So that was a great way to get discovered. And unfortunately, the way this league operates and the way that players are scattered about, which is beneficial to me as a CHL GM because I'm not going to lose my whole team all in one swoop. So I'm sure that's why they did it that way. But you lose that affiliation, so you lose that camaraderie, and you don't have 3 managers working together. You're kind of left on your own, and you have to seek out your enemies actually in order to help you. And say, hey, do you guys want to, play some scrimmages against us and, help us scout our own players? So it's a sticky situation for sure. And there's a lot of different heads and a lot of different, roads to travel.
Yeah, and excuse me. Yeah, and one of the things that I wanted to mention there is that one of the other things that I had put out there as well was basically, for GMs to feel free to approach the PA with requests to do scouting with other teams or with other players in particular. And now in this case, again, is a touchy subject at this point, and we never went along with anything. But I just wanted to get a feel for what was out there and what people wanted to do or wanted to stay away from. So I put it out there to basically, feel free to communicate with the PA about when it comes to scouting. And the basis is that we were giving them an environment where they could do the scouting so long as no communication directly with the players in regards to things that would be labeled as tampering were happening, then that's something that was completely legitimate. Because I mean, come to the reality, like people are in the chat box all the time throwing up sixes lobbies, right? So players and managers play with each other all the time, right? There's always all these other opportunities for the tampering to happen, but the league can't prevent every form of communication between, right?
Right, they totally can, but in this case I feel like they're giving them the forum to do it. It's one thing if they're going to go behind, everyone's back and kind of do it on their own. It's another thing where you're like, it's like you're putting a bunch of kids in a candy store and you're saying, don't touch anything now, just look, but no touching, and it's not going to happen. I mean, it's really not. If a GM, I'd like to think that most GMs are like me and are going to, try to follow the rules or whatever, but, people skirt the rules, and you're giving them the opportunity from a sanctioned league event, which I think that's the part that always rubbed me the wrong way, is that the league was backing it. It's like I forget what professional organization it is, but they have that allowed tampering rule right before free agency, and you've seen the difference. All of a sudden, all these players are signing day of. Yeah, I mean, a couple of leagues have adapted that rule, and you're seeing what's happening. I mean, it's kind of along the same lines. I mean, it's a bad analogy, but kind of along the same lines, where you're giving access to your players to play to teams that want to beat you. Like, I just don't see why that's beneficial to anyone who's doing their job. It's only helping the people who are slacking, and I'm just never going to support it, I guess.
And before I give the mic over to BB Prince there, I do want to mention there were some players that were in the training camps that did come back to me and say, hey, the day of, the training camp, that's the day I got noticed or whatever, and I got called up. I didn't hear, I don't think even one case where I heard, and not that they would necessarily say it, right, but I don't recall seeing or hearing any one case from management or players where they suspected tampering was involved and there was a trade for somebody to be called up or whatnot. But going back to my initial list of players who signed up and who played and whatnot, there were a good, I'd say maybe about half of them that ended up going on to CHL rosters. So the question is, was it effective or wasn't it? We really don't know, but...
Well, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I didn't notice anything. No report was ever sent. I mean, I'm sure you guys posted it somewhere, I guess, because that was the plan. But I tried to, distance myself from the whole system, so maybe that's why. But I never heard of any player playing any of these games, not once, not one of their names. And I assume that unfortunately, there aren't any other GMs left in the lobby, but I feel like either most of us just didn't pay attention to it, or just weren't active in it, or the message just wasn't delivered, in a way that we noticed. Because honestly, I don't know any players except for, actually, I know one. I had one player on my team that went to it. Aside from that, have no idea. It had no effect on my organization whatsoever, and I assume that it didn't have an effect on a lot of organizations.
And I will say, I take that personally as a win-win, because again, the concept isn't to necessarily interfere with the teams or what's happening within the teams, but to give an option to teams that are struggling or don't know how to do things, or again, to open up the doors, basically.
Well, maybe it's the phrasing. Maybe if instead of calling them scouting games, we called them training camp fun time or something like that. The fact that it's being promoted as a way to get noticed by teams that you're not under contract with, that's the part that, again, has always kind of, rubbed me the wrong way.
So I do want to point out as well that the scouting games were not used as a method for development, or for basically taking one position and having guys focus on that one position or anything like that. Again, to me, that's more along the lines of what a training camp is, as far as camps are concerned, which is one of the reasons why I labeled it more of a scouting game opposed to a camp. But that's also something else that could be looked at a little bit more. It's just the majority of the time when you get into topics about whether it's managers developing players or players helping other players from higher leagues to lower leagues, it doesn't generally happen at all, for a few different reasons. One of it being is a lot of this TC guys. Some of them, rightfully so, are a bit cocky about their style and how good they are and whatnot, so they don't want to learn. Another reason being that the guys higher up don't really want to give ammunition to the guys below them to take their spot. Again, the conversation about management not having time to do something like that. So again, I'm just throwing this out there just because, again, that's not the focus or the purpose of what the scouting games was there for. But I think we've had a lot of time to talk about a lot of things. I don't know, again, who else. I just noticed my controller headset had gone out. Yeah, I didn't really see that anything negative that's come of this conversation and whatnot. I don't know, again, who's left in the lobby still. But I do want to give a chance for anybody to say anything regarding the training camp on any angle that maybe hasn't been mentioned, or whether it's support or naysayers or whatever the case may be. I want to go ahead and open that up to you guys. Part of, if there's anything else you want to throw in there as well regarding maybe something that maybe we haven't touched on that maybe could use a little bit of attention before we wrap things up. But just before I hand the mic over to you guys, I do want to thank you all for coming out and making your voices heard. And I guess now the next step would be to basically see where the community agrees with in terms of the different viewpoints. But with that, Pauda, any suggestions on anything else here? Or do you see anybody in the lobby there that maybe wants to throw any comments or questions out? I'm open to answering any questions.
Well, while you're taking stuff from the lobby, I mean, I'm gonna say it as for the final time. I think that I understand the frustration that the Players Association has with trying to deal with all these incoming requests as to they don't understand their role as a TC. Listen, if they signed up late, didn't get enough scout, trust me, if you scouted for a team, you eventually got picked up by somebody because there wasn't as much scouting that you'd expect. And with
All right,
everybody,
give me 1 second there, Prince. We'll get back to you.
with everybody scouting, they're going to get picked up because not all GMs run scouting lobbies, and by the end of the bidding week, people are just randomly bidding on positions they need. I think the Players Association is doing a noble thing by getting these players involved and helping keeping the community active, even if they are on the TC. However, I do think you are compromising the integrity of a team's TC because Nicky W may have a guy on Medicine Hat that can only play one game a week because his work schedule allows that. And you know what? That's the perfect. I had 3 of those guys last year where I let them play one game a week for my TC, and when they hit their game limit, I had to waive them. And it worked out just fine because there'd be guys that no-showed or didn't sign up for certain games, and I didn't have to play them 3 games because they didn't follow their end of the bargain. And I'm sure Nicky likes to have that secret weapon on the TC that when he calls him up, he's confident and that he's not out pimping himself around to other GMs to kind of see where he would fit best, trying to get a spot on the roster and stealing that talent from his roster.
Right, and again, that's why I understand why it would be a PA concern more than my concern, because yes, I would rather protect my roster. That's my job. I want my players to further their careers. I've told all my guys that I want to see them up in the AHL, next year, if not this year. And I want my training camp guys to move up, and that's what I told them from the beginning. As my players, on the active roster play better, they're going to get noticed that way, and the training camp players are going to get noticed, once they jump in their spots. And you're right. Like I said, I'd rather not have any other GMs poking around in my training camp. I mean, I assume most GMs feel the same way.
All right. I know Prince there had something he wanted to say, so I'm going to give him the mic here.
I don't know if the broadcast picked up the question or the statement really. It was about the Xbox One versus the 360 for next season. I'm pretty sure the league said they're going with the One. They took their own polls or whatever, and it seemed like the majority of the people were going to go with the One. I agree with you, and I believe Krug actually brought it up too, that there's probably going to be a drop-off for season, the first season under the One. But I don't know. I mean, personally, I've had it since the day it came out. I wish that this season's game was on the One. I can't wait. I'd love new announcers and new graphics and all sorts of new stuff. Hopefully, if they come through with their promises, and if we have issues with attendance or with signups, personally I don't think we're gonna. I think it's gonna work itself out. But look at what happened this year. I mean, if we have to have 40 teams, I think we do a lot better with less training camp players. We would at least have places for everybody, and there'd be less frustration and less stagnation, I guess would be the better word for it. From a problem, we're gonna there's a positive at the end.
So I want to mention 2 things there.
While he's listening to that comment, I will confirm that we are going to the Xbox One, and it would make absolutely no sense to stay on the 360 for another season. The console's shelf life is dead. There'll still be people using it because they can't get an Xbox One, but it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever to be the cutting-edge league on the Xbox 360.
I agree.
All right, so Prince, just to answer the question, the league has decided to go with the One, so that's something that's pretty well known in the community now. And I think there are some people that might agree with you to some degree, but I think the majority have basically mentioned that the direction that the league should go, and that's the reason for the decision is to go with the one. I do also want to mention, though, with the expected shortened list of players on the CHL. Okay. So with less players in the CHL, I do pose it as an opportunity for the league in any respect to make adjustments while there are less players there as well, in terms of restructuring and whatnot, without trying to mess around too much with what's already there. So, regards to training camp and whatnot, it's a perfect opportunity to have a smaller set of guys to work with to be able to set things up and whatnot for when things get much larger. You're right. It will be interesting regardless, because what happens if we turn out with just enough for, let's say, 4 teams in the CHL? It's not going to be much of a league for the CHL, but I'm not sure how that's going to be addressed. But again, let's not take this conversation off on a tangent, and let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Unless there's somebody else besides Nikki, Powder, myself, BB Prince, that wants to say something, then again, I want to thank you guys. I want to remind you all to please go and fill out the surveys. I don't know if it's a little bit lengthy, but it touches on a lot of topics, and it gives opportunity for you to say that yes, the league is misguided, or that no, it's not. And if, again, even if things aren't, or if maybe some of the things are taken from what was done this season and they're applied in a different perspective, the survey gives an option for you to basically speak your mind about those different angles of things, so that way we can take this and put it into polls for clear-cut answers. Should we do this? Yes, no. Should we do that? Yes, no. But we need the responses. Again, about 1,200 or 1,300 guys in the CHL, mixed between training camp and regular roster and management. And you guys are the guys who give us direction. It's not just what we want to do that happens here. I mean, so far I've got about a 25% response rate compared to how many views there are, which I don't think is too bad. But when you look at the quantity in terms of what that means, we're still talking under 20. Again, I stress to you guys, fill out the survey, get the guys on your team and on your training camps to fill out the survey. Give us some clear direction, please. And by all means, we're misguided, then let's make it right. We're not, well, let's run with it. But let's do something. Obviously, what's there now isn't working. So that's what we want to fix. Todd, I'll give it to you if you want to go ahead and wrap up the show there.
All right. Yeah, it's been an interesting hour and a half. We've obviously it's our first time doing one of these town hall type meetings. It's going to be a very effective way to communicate with the players of the league, and we hope for other town hall meetings to come up in the future. With that being said, you are watching the LGCHL Players Association town hall meeting discussing training camp, scouting games. Thank you, Nikki W. and Bottomless Pit for helping me, or for doing this, setting this up. I was just kind of here as the facilitator from the media team. And don't forget, that survey is huge. All your feedback is taken into account by these guys. If you don't fill it out, changes can't be made. If you do fill it out, your opinions are heard, and it's going to help shape the league. So for everybody watching and everybody that tuned in the lobby, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. You guys have a good one.